think it would be remiss of me to not say something about the Rochdale by-election. I watched the results last night with my dad. We hadn't really planned it, it just happened to be on. We were watching something else. It seemed to take a long time to come through, partly because George Galloway was taking a long time to arrive. And the procedure is they don't read out the results until all candidates are present, as I understand it. I wonder if there should be some sort of stipulation that there should be a deadline for candidates to turn up or something. I don't know. Because you could have a situation where one candidate just wants a grandstand and be late. I don't know. I think it's fair to say that there has been more scrutiny and attention on this by-election than any, perhaps in recent memory. Um, Rochdale's a sizable town. It's a town that has had its fair share of bad press in recent years, not least for the grooming scandal, um, in which, and let's be clear what that was about. Predominantly South Asian men, well, specifically men of Pakistani descent, predominantly preying on white working class girls because they had a racist sense that they were easy prey, so to speak. And to say that, people will say it's dog whistle politics, it's singling out one race, but that's a reality. These were racist gangs that saw these vulnerable girls as easy targets. And to be fair, there are prominent British Asian men, British Pakistani men, like Sajid Javid and Majid Nawaz, who condemned that. But it was one of the worst crimes, collectively speaking, in this country in recent years. Um, Now, Galloway won this resoundingly. Let's be clear about that. I'm just going to read out the results before I talk a bit about this because there is a lot of talking points around this. Firstly, before I read out the results, it was quite low turnout. I don't know how significant that is, 39%, but it has to be noted it was a low turnout. So this is the results. George Galloway, the Workers' Party, make of that what you will. George Galloway's been in numerous parties over the years. 12,335 votes, a resounding victory. David Tully, who I understand is a local businessman, he's an independent, 6,638. Paul Ellison, the Conservative candidate, 3,731 votes. Asher Ali, Labour Party candidate, 2,402 votes. Worth noting that he was suspended from Labour, of course, for the controversial tweets that he liked or the social media posts that he liked, which ostensibly blamed Israel for what happened on October the 7th last year. But it was too late he was suspended, I understand, after the fact. So he was on the ballot as the Labour candidate. If he'd won, he would have sat in Parliament as an independent, but in the event he didn't win anyway. Ian Donaldson, Liberal Democrats, 2,164 votes. Simon Danchuk, the Reform Party, 1,968. He'd previously been suspended from the Tories, I believe, or Labour, if I could get that correct. Uh, I should know which part. I think he was Labour, actually, Simon Danchuk. I'm just going to double check this, but while I'm doing that, suspended over text he sent to an underage girl. He had been, I think it was Labour, if I get this right. I do need to double check this. Yeah, the Labour Party. He's now standing for the Reform Party, but in the event they didn't win anyway. I thought Danchuk was Labour, but I just wanted to double check that. William Howarth, Independent, 523. Guy Otten, Green Party, 436. Mark Coleman, Independent, 455. Michael Howarth, Independent, 246. Raven Roden, subordinate, the Monster Raving Looney Party, 209. Mark Coleman, if that name sounds like the clergyman who was an activist with Just Stop Oil. Well, if I'm thinking of the right person here, and I take full responsibility if this is wrong, but if that's the clergyman who's was with Just Stop Oil. Well, that's a message to Just Stop Oil. Although the big story tonight is, of course, George Galloway's victory. Galloway was late. Apparently, he's going to have a victory parade, presidential style. No ego involved there. Um, there's a lot of controversies around it. For one thing, Galloway's not from Rochdale; he's from Glasgow. Um, so there will be questions of, can he really represent the people of Rochdale? There's no question that he's got a resounding victory. But the big story tonight is some of the things around this. Galloway, in his victory speech, he immediately attacked Keir Starmer. He said this is for Gaza, and he's very much pitched this as being about Gaza. He's also went on more local issues that are less controversial, for example, saving the local football club, things like that, hospital spaces, and bread and butter issues. But the big thing, of course, is he's pitching this about Gaza. Galloway no longer represents the Respect Party. I don't know if Respect even still exists. The Workers' Party. So, you know, I don't know if that's the Socialist Workers' Party or just another spin off of the far left. Um, yeah, I mean, Galloway is one of the most controversial politicians in modern British history. Um, among many controversies, this is a man who openly praised Saddam Hussein, met Saddam Hussein. Galloway's always kind of distanced himself from that, but he's never expressed clear remorse for that. He was very, very vocally critical of Tony Blair and Blairites for their support for the Iraq War, but Galloway is far from blameless when it comes to Iraq. You know, um, People could say what they want about Tony Blair, and I think the Iraq War was a disaster. I'm under no illusions about that. But for Galloway to pontificate on that when he praised the genocidal dictator is grotesque. Another thing I have a big problem with regarding George Galloway is his pandering to Russia. Galloway presided over Sputnik News. Um, Now, it was in his name, but this was kind of a spin off from RT. RT, of course, is a mouthpiece for the Kremlin. And I mean, my goodness, look at the name Sputnik, named after the Soviet satellite of the 50s. It was unquestionably linked to the Kremlin, as all pro Russian mouthpieces are. Now, this is not to say Galloway was directly paid by Moscow, but it doesn't take too much to connect the dots there. I actually saw the headquarters when I was getting my visa for China at the Chinese consulate in Edinburgh. Sputnik happened to share the building, and I will be brutally honest, I was thoroughly tempted to write something naughty on the door. I didn't because, you know, I didn't want to, I wanted my visa thing to go smoothly, but I saw that and I was thoroughly tempted to write something like Russian mouthpiece or something on the little sign. I really was because I think that Kremlin propaganda outlets in this country are a disgrace. I think Galloway is a disgrace. Clearly, he knows how to, he's clearly a strong orator. He has something. I think he's a toxic character, but I don't deny his political skills. Clearly he can jet in here and win. So I don't deny that he's a skilled political operator. Um, but the very concerning thing from tonight is allegations made by the leader of the Reform Party, Richard Tice, namely that his staff actually had to have police protection and there were violent threats made against them, racist threats. Um, Now, when he said this to the BBC journalist, the pitch that the BBC journalist was taking was very much, oh, you sound like you sour grapes. I thought that was pretty unprofessional, and I'm not sure that would be levelled at any other party. Um, I mean, by all means, the journalist has to play the devil's advocate and say, well, this is the allegations that you're making. But I really didn't like that angle. These are very serious allegations. Now, what he didn't say what was the police response? Did the police make any arrests for these threats? What was the situation? It's fair to say there was significant tension over this election. But politicians on left and right have been attacked in recent years. We've had deaths. Um, Sir David Amis, Joe Cox. That's just in the last 10 years. There have been numerous violent threats. Female MPs have needed security. And bear in mind, there's 650 MPs. So, proportionally speaking, it's actually a risky profession. Proportionally speaking. I mean, if you had two deaths for this proportion of people, say the police, that would amount to probably how many police officers are there in the country? Well over 100,000. So that would amount to dozens of police being killed in 10 years. Um, it's actually a risky profession now, being an MP. I take the position that MPs enter the public domain, they make decisions that affect people's lives. They have to have tough skin, and it should be absolutely legitimate to criticise or dislike an MP. But clearly, threats are crossing that threshold. Now, in London recently, MPs who have supported the Prime Minister's position on Israel and Gaza have had mobs outside their homes. The Met haven't done enough, in my opinion. And those mobs might claim that they're peaceful, but that would be pretty intimidating for anyone, especially if they have a family who are not in politics. So I think the claims made by Richard Tice have to be taken very seriously, and he's also alleged voting irregularities. Now he isn't calling for a vote rerun, but he has said this is a very sad day for democracy. Some will say he's just sour grapes that his party lost, but I do think that given what's been happening elsewhere, given what's been happening in London, the claims of violent threats are very, very plausible, and that's a disgrace. I would not at all be surprised if there were Islamists active in Rochdale. I'm not saying that there are 12,000 Islamists who voted for George Galloway, um, but clearly, the allegations that Mr. Tice has made have to be taken seriously. Because if that's replicated elsewhere, Galloway was making veiled threats. He said, I put you on notice, referring to the councillors. He was careful to thank the returning officer and election staff, but, this is typical George Galloway. Veiled threats. It's not to say he made violent threats, but what's his response to this? A journalist needs to ask him. Of course, he refused to do an interview with the BBC. But if there is an interview for any outlet, what they need to ask Galloway is the allegations that Mr. Tice has made about threats. Will Galloway unequivocally condemn those threats? Will he disown those individuals from his party as MP for Rochdale? Um, I don't think there's going to be like a wave across the country like this. I think Rochdale was a particularly unique situation because of all the things that have been going on there. Nevertheless, it is an eye opener. Galloway now stands, I believe, for the fourth time as an MP. He was a Labour MP and a Respect MP. Apparently, it's the fourth time. I'm not sure what the third time was, but yeah. Labour won Rochdale at the last general election with a 9,668 vote majority. So this will clearly be a headache for Keir Starmer. Even though Labour is on the ascendancy, Labour will probably win the general election. It will be a headache, and no doubt George Galloway will kick up a lot of stink against Starmer regarding what's going on in the Holy Land. Um, it's a little bit like what's happening to Biden in Michigan. The protest votes, those people who were uncommitted as a protest over Biden's support for Israel, although both Biden and Blinken have criticized Israel in recent weeks. Some say that's not enough. They've criticized them, but they still send weapons. I am uneasy about the level of suffering that's going on in Gaza. I am uneasy about the way Israel is approaching this, and I still maintain it's legitimate to criticize Israel. But there is a thin line between that and anti Semitism. There was a mural in London that showed two little girls, one with a scarf, one with in not exactly Jewish clothes, but the point is one was Israeli, one was Palestinian, and they were embracing, and it was a message for peace. It got vandalized, and it said, thousands of Palestinian dead since October the 7th. But this message since October the 7th is suggesting all the deaths haven't included October the 7th. Let's never forget that hundreds of Israeli civilians were killed that day. And that doesn't balance out the thousands of Palestinians that have subsequently been killed. But there is a narrative going on that is kind of censoring, or not censoring, it's kind of whitewashing what happened on that day. I mean, one refrain I've heard is this conflict didn't begin on October the 7th. That is true, but October the 7th did trigger Israel's response to and this escalation of violence. Um, anyway, that's Rochdale. I don't think it's going to be the status quo across the board, but I think it is concerning, particularly what Mr. Tice has alleged. And I would like to know what the police response was, and will George Galloway unequivocally condemn that? And if not, why not?